Hi there, everyone. I'm Sam Danley, Associate Editor of QSR and FSR magazines, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, sponsored by Hi Auto. We are going to hear all about AI order taking at the drive-thru, one of the most talked about transformations in the quick service world right now. It's definitely a space where there's a lot of hype. So today we are going to cut through some of that noise with a real world success story. We will be hearing from leaders at Bojangles, which has not only tested but scaled AI order taking across 400 locations and counting, as well as Hi Auto, the supplier with the most live voice AI drive-through stores in the industry. But first, I have just a few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. Number one, a recording of this session will be linked at qsrmagazine.com. You can also use today's login link for on-demand viewing. Also, we will be answering audience questions throughout the presentation, so please feel free and in fact encouraged to submit a question in the Q&A box at any time. Third, you can arrange the various modules on your screen so you can size up the slides or size up the speakers as you see fit throughout the presentation. And lastly, if you happen to run into any problems with the platform, you can just click on the help button in the top menu for troubleshooting steps. And now to begin. We are joined today by Jose Armario, the CEO of Bojangles, Richard Delvalle, the CIO and Chief of Staff at Bojangles, and Roy Baharov, co-founder and CEO of Hi Auto. With that, I will turn things over to them to get started. Take it away, Roy.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending. AI order taking has been one of the hot topics in the QSR world, but what's often missing is a grounded, operationally proven story. That's what today is about. And I want to pass to this next slide. Bojangles didn't just test AI at the drive-thru, they committed. They scaled it across over 400 stores as of earlier this week. And they made it part of how they are serving the guests. At Hi Auto, we've been very fortunate to partner with Bojangles and learn a great deal along this way. And this is not just about technology. It's about leadership, alignment, operational discipline, and a clear vision of how AI enhances both the guest and the team member experience. So today we're going to unpack all of these things. And our goal is to keep the spirit of Bolinda, which is how Bojangles is calling the AI order taker, during this webinar. So we're going to try and stay clear, consistent, and human. We'll start with a few questions that I'm going to ask, and then we'll want to get the audience, as involved as possible. Please post questions, and we'll take those questions. And hopefully it's going to be a very interesting conversation. And before I start, I just want to say a sincere thank you to Jose and Richard for generously sharing with you their industry insights that they have gathered over the last 2.5 years. It's not something that should be taken for granted, so really thank you. I really appreciate it. And I want to start with Jose. Jose, you had a very successful career before taking on the role of CEO at Bojangles. What made you decide to take on voice AI as one of the first players to do that and scale so quickly? Why did you take this risk, and what was the vision behind it?
Yeah, thank you, Roy. And I appreciate the invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on the podcast here with you today and with my tremendous colleague and partner in crime, Mr. Richard Delvalle. And I think that to answer your question, Bojangles prides itself to be at the cutting edge of all things that matter to the consumer, whether it's the best platforms for ordering product, to cooking our product, holding our product, delivering our product, whether it's through delivery or catering, and to continue to be where the customer wants us to be. And it has become an obvious thing that today's consumer interacts and does everything through a device. Everyone uses this as a method of sort of their daily lives. And so as we started to work on how to continue to innovate at our company and become more contemporary, to Richard's credit, Richard actually approached us and said, I think we should look at AI through the drive-through. And we did. And as part of our vision of being at the best and at the cutting edge of anything and everything that can help the consumer have a great experience, we started to look into it. And to your credit, Roy, and to the credit of Hayato, when we did our research, and I think, Richard, you could chime in here, it became very clear to us that Hayato was at the cutting edge of the technology. And I would say that for most people, and certainly for me, this was a brand new area and a little scary because, how reliable is the technology? Will it offend customers? Will it really produce the results that supposedly it's supposed to produce? How much intervention will there have to be between the manager or the order taker and the customer? There were all these sort of questions we had that made us pause and really ask ourselves, is this really going to work? And as we got to know you and your team, and obviously the technology, we started to become more confident about the capability. And when we dived into that very first restaurant, which our team members at the restaurant actually named the voice Bolinda to their credit, which was really cool, right? To have the team members at the restaurants come up with the name. It's honestly just taken off on its own, which is a testament to how effective the technology is that you provide to us and to others. So that's how it all came about. Richard, what would you add? I mean, you kind of brought it to me, to be honest. So you saw something early on that made you say, we've got to look at this, Jose.
We did. And it's funny, Jose, because you look back at it and you say, yeah, we went in with a range of assumptions, most of which panned out. And we discovered these other benefits as we started developing the product and working with it that frankly we didn't expect, right? So and I think what got us, my team and I had a lot of fun, and I have to give a lot of credit. It's easy for me to sit here, but really have an extraordinary team here that worked very hard on this. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the thing we discovered very quickly was it heard everything. And that was the thing that amazed us, right? Without upgrading our speakers, without changing anything on our drive-through, it heard everything. It filtered out all the side noise. And believe me, we tried everything. We fake dogs, loud music, loud cars, people yelling in the back seat. We tried everything. And no matter what, the technology always heard the person it needed to hear. And once we realized we had that, we knew it was worthwhile to start pulling on the string and working the system and trying to build to something that would go. Because to me, that was the basic building block. And, in all candor, we did look at a couple of other solutions. There was nobody that had the listening technology, which is the first thing we noticed, was nobody had that listening capability that we could find. We discovered all the other wonderful things afterwards, but that was the thing that really broke the dam for us when we said, okay, if we can solve that, we can make the rest of it work.
Thank you, Richard. So maybe there is actually a question that came up, and maybe it's a good one to take from Pierre, I think.
Oh, sure. I saw that. I saw that. Do you want me to take it, Roy?
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, let me say hello to my very good friend, Pierre Ricosa. We worked together at another brand, and he's gone on to even bigger and better things. So, Pierre, it's great to see your name here on the podcast with the question. And I'm going to say it out loud, if that's okay, for anyone who's just listening. With Bojangles already leveraging AI-powered order takers with multi-language capabilities, which we didn't even touch on yet. We just launched the Spanish version of Bolinda.
I think we had Jose freeze for a moment. Yeah, while we wait for Jose to come back, he was just touching on the fact that we have, in actual point of fact, it is bilingual now. And Belinda is able to interact with people who speak Spanish right away. In fact, it detects, I think because as soon as we get Jose back, but actually you can both request Spanish by simply saying Espanol, or the system will listen for what you're saying. And if it detects that you're speaking Spanish, we'll immediately kick over to that. And I'll hand back to Jose. We'll keep going here. So I think the question that we were trying to answer was, I'm looking for it here now. What feedback have you gotten from customers? It's overwhelmingly positive. We're a high touch brand. We always have, Jose, you're back. I was just talking, I'll let you take over for feedback from people for Spanish.
Well, what I want to first say is that the high auto technology is much more reliable than the technology we're using right now for the podcast.
We're not using high auto.
Let me just say that right now. So apologies for the breakups here. As you mentioned, Richard, I think customers overall have been extremely impressed. People are typically in a hurry. They want someone to take their order. They want it to be friendly. Belinda does all of that. She does a great job suggestive selling. Sometimes we kid that Belinda is one of our best employees because she's so reliable and she's on time and she has a great attitude every day. And as far as improvements, Richard, I think we have seen some steady improvement on order taking times. When people pull up, it will start to take the order. And some of our restaurants and franchisees during the low sales periods, what we have found is that's when we've seen the biggest sales increases, because typically in those afternoon non-peak periods, late night periods, you're running with a little bit less staff. Belinda takes the order and actually helps us get the expediting part of the order out quicker. And it's actually helped to increase our sales. And Richard, if I'm not mistaken, we've seen a healthy increase in average check as well, because she's one of the best salespeople on the team with order taking or suggestive selling. Is that right?
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. And again, as Jose touched, slow periods and busy periods, right? So, there is no, I like to tell people, there's no version of Belinda that's identical everywhere. So if we have a very high volume breakfast restaurant, because Bojangles does do a very healthy breakfast business, in the very busy restaurant, she might only do order taking to keep the lines moving, because what our guest needs at that point in time is a speed experience. And in a lower velocity time period, she'll engage and do the upselling that you would want your best cashier to do on every transaction. And our theory on upselling remains the same. People like to have recommendations. They like to be guided through their order. So, we call it upselling. You might also call it guiding the guests to great decisions. But, all that is happening at the right time. And, we have it dialed into the day of the week and even the hours. So certain days of the week at breakfast, we're upselling. Other days of the week, we're just concentrating on speed. So, yeah, there's definitely there is a check benefit in terms of upsizing and selling, recommended desserts, et cetera. Does a great job of that.
There was a question about the session being recorded. I think it is being recorded, so that was an easy one. Roy, do you want to just look at the questions, or you want me to try to tackle some of these as we see them come up?
So maybe I think there are a few good questions on performance, and I think maybe we can tackle a few of them together. So there is one question on intervention rate from employees, and I think they are referring, Kevin Pope is referring to this slide that we showed before, which this I just want to say, first of all, thank you to InTouch Insights, that did this independent research. We actually didn't know about this research until we saw the results and until Jose sent those to us. And what they did is they actually sent 120 secret shoppers to 3 brands that are using voice AI systems, and this is what they found. But Richard, maybe you can talk about what are actually the Bojangles results that you see on a slightly larger sample.
Yeah, it's. I like to point out to people that this is, and Jose knows this is our 6-month overnight success story, right? You don't get to 3% by accident. You get to it through a lot of work. For those of us who have spent our entire careers, dealing with point of sale, the safety valve in a point of sale system is the beloved enter a message feature, right? If I can't find a button for it, I just type in a message and I'm covered, right? Voice AI can't do that. Voice AI has to have something to look up that references back to what the guest has asked for. We always, Jose, we go back and laugh. I think it was the 3rd order that we got in our first test restaurant. Person pulls up and goes, "I'd like a hollowed out biscuit." So we look at ourselves and go, 1, why would anybody ruin an incredible treat like our biscuit by hollowing it out? But then once I got over that part, I realized rapidly, we didn't have a button for that. In the past, we would have just entered a message. So, to get to these kind of numbers, it took my team months, literally months of entering 0-price modifiers for every product so that no matter what came out of the guest's mouth, we were able to accommodate it. A lot of credit to Hi Auto software, which has the capacity to interpret what a guest says, because one guest may say, "I want a hollowed out biscuit." The next guy may say, "I want an empty biscuit." They mean the same thing. So Hi Auto's technology has to understand to point both of those comments at the same non-price PLU so we can insert it. So when people ask, how do we get to 3%? A lot of work. And the other thing that we did early on, there were some prerequisites. One was to make sure that we were using the same PLUs across the entire company. Remember, we have a large number of franchisees within our system. We have our own corporate restaurants are in the high 200s. And what we did early on as we were ramping up the Hi Auto project was homogenize PLU numbers across every Bojangles in the system. So a steak biscuit is the same PLU number in every single restaurant we have. So there were some prerequisites there in terms of setting yourself up for success. Without that, you'll never get this kind of a success rate. And we think that's one of the things that some people miss. There's a lot of homework that goes into this. There's other things. But that's definitely key to that. Somebody else, there was another question about, does that 3% include people that go, "I don't want to talk to a computer"? The answer is yes, it does. But that is a very small percentage, a very small subset of that 3%. About half of that 3% is going to be in the unlikely event that we've run out of something briefly. The team members have the ability to tell Belinda that they're out of something. If they don't remember to do it or don't do it, that will cause one of the interventions because a guest will order it and the team member will have to jump it. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but that's how, again, putting a lot of our shoulder into this to get us to this point in time. But that becomes self-sustaining. Every time we enter a new product now, we have a group that sits down and figures out every possible thing that somebody might want to do to that. We have a wonderful product called the burrito right now. Wrapped in our tortilla with sausage and sausage gravy and cheese and hash browns. I'm getting hungry, or bow rounds. And we had the program and they say, what might somebody do to this? They might change from sausage to bacon. They might hold the cheese. All the things we have to think ahead and put in there. If you do the work, you can get to this level of success.
Richard, if you are, we're talking about all the optimizations, and I think maybe to just add, one of the things that you have been really, really good at was working with the restaurants to make sure that they don't intervene for no good reason. And based on these intervention reports, you were able to follow up and also reduce those kind of interventions, and it became part of the culture. So I think that was really amazing to see in your operations. Another question that came up here is, how do you do the speed optimization, and maybe also touch on the upsells, because you are the maestro of this show, and you come and you say, okay, tomorrow start upselling that, and stop doing this, and maybe talk a little bit about some of these optimizations, what happened in the very high volume stores during breakfast. Maybe you can touch on some of those areas. I think people would be interested.
With the intervention rate is an interesting question, and Jose sees this too. When we go into a restaurant for the first time, there's a little window, might be a week or so, where you got to let go, and people have to start trusting the system, and so it takes a little bit. So we may see on the first week, maybe we're only getting to 85% success because the team members are jumping in the second that they detect or think they detect a pause, or maybe there is a real pause. That confidence builds slowly over time. And once you get to that point where they trust her. And Jose will tell you, if anything goes wrong, and for some reason she's not working, it's not good for them because they miss her. They don't get mad at her. She's a person to them too. So it's like, well, Belinda's having a bit of an off time, but she'll be okay in a few minutes. And they'll keep going. So the interventions definitely come down over time. But I would say, Jose, to a large extent, as we move from promotional window to promotional window, we'll set at a very high level, the executive team, what our goals are, what products we're looking to sell and move, because what Belinda offers and suggests will move at a higher rate. So that's a high level strategic executive team decision as we move from promotional window to promotional window. I don't know, Jose, if you have any more color on how we make those choices.
I think the beauty of this technology, to Richard's point, is you could set Belinda to suggestive sell by day part, by promotion. If you decide that it's not effective, you can change it the next day, the next hour. And it's got all that flexibility. And she's very consistent and very reliable when it comes down to that. As a matter of fact, just a fun fact is that recently we started to roll it out in one of our newer markets in Texas. And Belinda was doing such a good job with suggestive selling that the team decided to challenge the non-Belinda restaurants to do as good a job as Belinda with suggestive selling. And they're just averaging just below Belinda as a whole. So she's still beating everyone who's trying to beat her. And, there's a lot of good questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but there's a question about, can customers tell they're interacting with AI? And the answer is, I think we chose to make it obvious because the technology is so good. It could be pretty close to being as human as you want, right, Richard? But
absolutely.
We want the customer to know they're interacting with AI because we think it helps the customer understand who they're dealing with. And you can check off what type of voice. I mean, if you like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he can actually be the voice that takes the order. We chose not to go that route. We like Arnold, but we wanted to go with a different type of voice. And I think customers are very understanding when they're dealing with AI. They know what they're dealing with. And I've been shocked at how quick the transaction is, which is another question that was on there. How long does it take? Well, it depends on how long you want to take giving your order to Belinda. If you pull up and say, I want a Cajun filet combo, that's it, and you go, Belinda's done. She's not going to do anything else. The intelligence is that good. But if you're going to take your time and you're going to ponder, so will Belinda, right? I mean, it's really that interactive and that sort of human, if you will, considering it's AI. Is that right, Richard? Would you add anything else to that?
No, you're absolutely right. It was intentional on our part not to mimic a human voice distinctly. I say to people all the time, I said, you talk to Siri, you can tell you're talking to an electronic device. Alexa, you can tell you're talking to it's a natural voice, but it's clearly a machine. And we believe very strongly that part of our success here is the fact that we treat our customers with respect. We're not trying to trick them. We're trying to help them. But Jose touched on something really interesting, and Roy, you and I have talked about this before. There's a science to this, and there's an art, and they're both equally important, right? How long do I wait? How long does Belinda wait after asking somebody a question before she asks again? What's rude and what's too fast? What's too slow? And if you ever count it off on 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000 in your head, it's an eternity. So, this constant site by site in an urban location and in a city location, that delay may be 2 seconds. In a rural location, it may be 3, because we're trying to hit that sweet spot, I'm from New York. We have, in New York, we'll probably make it a half a second, but, it's a question of where you go and when and how you work it. But I always come back and I'll tell people, there is no one version of Belinda. She's slightly different everywhere. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect with the guest. That is the most important thing we're doing, by the way. This is about the guest, even though it's technology, that we're trying to deliver an experience that mirrors what they would expect from us. High touch.
That one other thing that I think is very interesting about the questions is who decides what functions. Obviously, we have a very large amount of company restaurants. So we have the capability, right, to say, okay, all restaurants suggest to sell a strawberry cobbler on every order, or to suggest to sell an LTO that we're running. Like soon we'll be running a steak biscuit LTO. But for our franchisees, they can decide what they want to promote and just to sell by restaurant, and again, by day part. So it's really got a lot of customization features that let our franchisees decide what's best for them. We try to act more like a big franchise organization, which we are in many ways. Yeah. But every franchisee can decide they want to promote something differently or emphasize something differently per restaurant. And one other thing I wanted to mention is to your point earlier, Richard, about how long it takes before the team has confidence in Belinda. I think what also has been an interesting learning, at least at the beginning, now the word's out, so I think there's less nervousness, but at the beginning of this venture, I think we were all a little surprised at how nervous the team members were about potentially losing their jobs, that someone was going to take hours away from them. And I don't think it took more than 48 hours for them to go, love Belinda, she's my best friend, because most of us that have drive-throughs in the industry, it's upwards of 70% or higher of your sales, typically, like in the industry. And so there's this one position in every restaurant that from the moment you open to the moment you close has to be manned. Someone has to take orders through that drive-through, typically every hour, every day that you're open. And when you alleviate the restaurant, the team, of the task of taking orders with something that's highly intelligent and very effective and very efficient, it allows the team to focus on other things that could be just as important, like preparing the order fresh, like making sure everything's in the bag, like making sure the person at the window that's going to take the payment is going to greet the customer, thank them, give them their order, and wish them well. And we've been able to take that task and that position and that sort of labor and energy that we need to put in taking the order and transfer it to the expediting position and the greet position for payment. It's been a real pleasant surprise. And as I mentioned, I think 48 hours after the first restaurant did the test, Belinda became everybody's best friend and most needed team member. So it's been quite a learning there.
Yeah, it's true. If you walked into a Belinda restaurant and said, we're taking her out tomorrow, you'd have a hard time getting out uninjured. You know, it is how we operate. And the other thing that we discovered as we went along was the consistency factor, right? You know, taking away, those of us that have drive-through operations, those of us who use drive-throughs on a personal basis, there is that moment where you pull up to the speaker post, you know, am I going to get greeted? Am I going to see, is there somebody there? How quickly am I going to wait, right? It never happens. As you're pulling up, your window's going down, Belinda's greeting you instantaneously. And she's greeting you actually with a warm greeting and introducing a product. That's how we do it. It's bow time. Would you like to try X? So your guests can be ordering at the tail end of the greeting. They can already be ordering a product. The order process has already begun. So, you know, that consistency in the greeting, the speed improvements actually, because you're not having any delays at the menu board per se, right? And to Jose's point, you know, we've taken employees that were doing 3 tasks before, order taking, fulfilling, and cashiering, and taken 33% of the work of the tasks away, but probably 50% of the work, and free them up. So, yeah, we replace, and we encourage our cashiers. We said, okay, we've lost a certain amount of personal interaction at the order point, and we train our people to supplement that at the cashiering and food delivery point. That's your chance to enhance the Bojangles brand, to engage the guests the way that we want them to be engaged.
Richard, I think it would be very valuable for the audience if you explain a little bit, how did you do it? Okay, so you did it, but you actually did it in a very scientific way. Maybe you can share whatever you can share. I think people would be happy.
Yeah, I think I started touching on it a little bit before. Success on the front end requires an incredible amount of work on the back end, you know, and we recognize that very early. And so in parallel to working on the technology that was facing the guest, we were working on the technology in the background. For instance, you know, every transaction is taking a round trip to the cloud today, you know, so before we even tried to launch across the entire organization, we were in the middle of a high-speed internet upgrade program, making sure that we had the highest connection bandwidth we could in our restaurants. Up to the point, believe it or not, we've actually put Starlink on a couple of restaurants because that was the way to get the best speed we could. All of our stores now have a 4G automatic failover as well. And I can tell you for a fact, Belinda will run on that 4G failover quite well, which really shocked us, but it does. So that was some of the background work. I already talked a little bit about the PLU alignment. We do have multiple POS systems in the Bojangles environment. We have a number of franchisees on one POS system called Lucas. We have most of our restaurants on the Xenial POS platform. We made a decision early on, we were going to parallel develop. It works on either platform. So again, we had to duplicate all that PLU work across 2 different POS platforms to get ready for it. We had to get menu alignment with every restaurant in the system. So, you know, we were very consistent, but there were some things that were different in different stores. We had to pull all that together, working with the operations and marketing teams. And that kind of created the backdrop where we could be successful. But the path at the end where we were actually, you know, executing in our first group of restaurants, our 3 and then 4 original test restaurants, That was a lot of people on the ground. That was IT directors and senior project managers sitting in those restaurants, listening to every transaction, watching what was going on, identifying where there were gaps in the system, and fixing them, and then making sure that they got fixed across the entire establishment. So that was part of our learning. Another part of our learning, believe it or not, was actually standing outside at the speaker box and watching the guest interact with Belinda. Now, Belinda can do a lot of things, but she can't read a facial expression. So, we needed to learn and figure out how to interpret pauses and delays in such a way that we would not interfere with the guest experience. And that's where I say, some restaurants we wait 2 seconds, some 3, some 1. We really had to feel that through. And once we had enough stores, we started to understand what it needs to look like in this environment versus that environment. Now, the other thing that we did, Roy, very early, and we haven't touched on this, and Jose and I are big believers in engaging our franchise community early. So by restaurant, I believe restaurant 11 was a franchise restaurant, 12 and 13, 14, 15. So we have great partners, came on early with us and helped us, develop, because we have a prism, they have a prism. So by the time it came time to start a broad rollout, I wasn't the one running around, Jose wasn't the one running around telling franchisees, "Oh, you should do this." Other franchisees were telling franchisees, "You should do this." And if you look today at our install base, we're roughly, Jose, I think we figured we're just about 50-50. We're actually, right, I don't want to correct you, but I believe we're 408 restaurants now. And in that 408, it's roughly half corporate and half franchise.
I think by the end of the year, over 50% of the entire Bojangles system will be on AI through the drive-through with Belinda, with High Auto. And to your point, Richard, right, like at the very beginning, I think there's a lot of skepticism because, it's hard to imagine there could be technology this effective. If you've not experienced it, it's hard to believe. And as we were rolling it out, there are always some franchisees that are much more technology friendly and savvy about being at the cutting edge. And there's always going to be some that are a lot more cautious, conservative. I'm going to wait and see. I don't want to rush through this. And as we began to roll it out, to your point, Richard, and franchisees started to roll it out, and they were seeing the sales increase or the average check increase, or they were just seeing there was a labor impact. The word gets out. I mean, we have not pushed this to any franchise organization. What we have done is explain what we're doing. This is the benefit of having a franchisor that has serious sort of commitment to owning and running company restaurants, right? Like we get to feel what franchisees feel every day. The hot breath of the P&L, the challenges with the labor market today. And let's face it, that's not going away. And this is a solution to some of the challenges that you have on the labor side. And I think we were looking for a 3 to 4 hour labor saving per day just to break even on the technology and the cost. And we have more than surpassed that without impacting service, if anything, improving service. So our franchisees got wind of that fairly quickly. And I think 99% of the franchisees that have tried it have stuck with it. There's only been one franchisee that got some customer feedback that didn't like, they prefer the person. And so we told them, well, then get off. Don't do it. But that is one out of over 406. And by the way, this is an excellent franchisee. He runs an excellent operation, but it's rare. It's super rare. So we do think the franchisees are now pushing us to let them go faster and to get on board. And some are still waiting and watching, which is fine. And we'll let it speak for itself.
Yeah, I agree, Jose. I'm sorry, just to touch on something Jose said, Yeah, there's been a few hours come out of the schedule, but they're shoulder hours. We don't need to bring somebody in as early. We can let somebody go a little earlier. So, when we talk about an hours reduction, it's fringe hours. So to the employees, it doesn't feel like anybody's lost a thing, and we pick up just a little bit of traction there to offset.
By the way, one of our biggest skeptics was our COO.
Yes.
Okay, and he was not in a hurry to do this because he watches our bottom line very carefully, right, Richard? And once it took us a second to figure it out, and you have to convince the managers, hey, you got to start, using Bolinda more. This isn't free labor. Once we figured out the right balancing act there and how to use Bolinda and what are the periods of time that she is best utilized, now our COO is pushing us to get it in all restaurants.
Everywhere right away, and there it goes.
And I think you can see it when you look at the graph. You can see the period of time where you build the infrastructure, and I think that like between restaurant 15 and like 40, this is where you figured out the labor, which part of it is like the savings, and part of it is the improvement in the service quality, where what you talked about, Richard, where you can take this content saving, labor content saving, and move it to other stations, and as a result improve the overall throughput. And so I think, and once you figured it out, at around restaurant 40, plus something that is, I think, very unique to Bojangles is that you have invested a lot upfront, supporting both POS systems, both Lucas and Xenial, plus having a lot of franchisees already as part of this, and only then giving the green light and starting to accelerate. And you can see the graph how it moved fast. So,
for sure. If you guys don't mind, I did see a question I would like to answer, which is John Brooks asked, is the AI also connected to inventory? The answer is no. It's not looking at perpetual inventory. When I talk about and I always like to use the word unlikely event, we run out of something. I'm talking about operationally, right? We got to run on French fries. We got to go cook off some more. It's going to take 8 minutes. They have the ability to interact with the system. They tap the headset. They say hi Auto. She doesn't recognize her own name sometimes, but they have to say hi Auto. Hi Auto, I'm out of French fries for 5 minutes or 6 minutes or 7 minutes, whatever it is. Hi Auto will immediately stop accepting orders for French fries, will apologize and offer another, we call them fixins, side. And at 5 minutes and 1 second, she will start taking French fry orders without being told again. So as they get used to that, it becomes actually quite a powerful tool. Now, as an above store operator, a little extra added benefit is that we can see that and know that that's happening. We can start to coach and train if we see a restaurant that's struggling in that particular area. So again, a lot of unexpected benefits as you go into a project like this and move forward with it. It's been quite interesting. For us. So short answer, no. You can stock out on something for a longer period of time if you are flat out of it, but it's not looking at inventory.
Okay,
And
what question do you want to take next, Jose? I can.
Sorry.
There you are. Yep.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Which question do you want to take next?
There's a lot of technological questions on here. I don't know if you guys want to take that on, but as far as AI is concerned, what I would say is I'm really glad that we partnered with Hi Auto. And I'm going to just have a quick infomercial here. We deal with a lot of supplier partners in our industry. Man, oh man, I feel very fortunate that Roy and his team are our partners. My biggest fear is that you become so popular that we kind of lose the intimate partner friend approach that we have. We feel like we can call you for anything. You respond immediately. You and your team have been fantastic and have made the transition into this venture so successful because of the service that you guys provide. And I think in today's world, that's really tough to find. So I salute you, Roy, and your team on everything that you're doing to help us. And I don't know, Richard, do you see some technology questions?
I see a couple that are interesting. Somebody asked, Charles Miller asked, does Belinda have the ability to take orders simultaneously to drive through? The answer is yes. We do have a number of dual lane drive-through, Y configuration drive-throughs. And yeah, it's no problem at all. She'll take an order on one side and an order on the other lane simultaneously. I did learn the hard way that speaker volume becomes very important at that point in time, because if they're set too loud, all of a sudden the guy in lane 2 is ordering to lane 1, one's ordering to 2. So again, art with the science. You got to have those speakers have got to be just loud enough for the lane, but not so loud that the other lane can hear you. Other than that, it works very, very well for that. So I think that's a big one there. You also have a question. This is Carlo Plaza. This is more of a general question, Jose. You might be able to help me with. Many franchisees are struggling, and absolutely very true, and unfortunate. To stay afloat, cannot justify spending money on technology like AI. Are Bojangles franchisees seeing a good ROI with Belinda? And
I think we know the answer to that, right? Franchisees are very savvy business people. And the first thing they're going to ask us when we talk about this, is there an ROI? And the ROI here is twofold, right? Like, your sales should go up, especially during non-peak periods when you struggle to have the consistency of order taking because you have less people that are multitasking. And this takes over for you there. And then second, the labor savings. There's an absolute labor savings here. So you get the benefit of more consistency on taking orders, which should increase your sales. And second, you're going to get the benefit of the labor savings because it's that much more efficient. And I also think a question from Grace Kennedy that I'd like to also take on. It's a little bit of a general. What advice do you have for QSRs who are just beginning this AI journey? And I'm sure you can jump in here, Richard. I think the first thing is go slow and really understand all aspects of integrating it into your operation and creating the glide path, because that's really what we did, right, Richard? We created, after we did those first 10 to 15 restaurants, what's the right glide path where you could start with it and then start to press a little bit about the labor savings and bring them slowly into it so they could figure it out with you. And then once you hit, is it a 12-week glide path where we see the maximum?
Originally it was. We've now shortened it down to about 4. So because we've gotten so refined now that it's, generally our restaurants, most restaurants have a couple of weeks worth of schedules in place. We leave those alone, let it go a couple more, and then we start to tweak back our guides a little bit. But yeah, it doesn't take long anymore. But Jose, you touched on a good point. In that mid zone there, where you look there, 20 to 40 or 30 to 40 in that area, we slowed down. We kind of stopped and we said, okay, am I going to see the benefits that I saw in the first 10? Are they duplicatable? Am I going to see those across these other 30? And we very quickly realized, yes, they are. But I would also tell people going into this, you need to understand your guest. You need to understand your menu. You need to know why it's different here versus there. And you need to think about that. So as we expanded, replicating inside the same market, like Charlotte, for instance, we have a lot of restaurants. Once we had it sorted out, it was relatively easy to move fast there. But as we shifted to Nashville or to Charleston or Wilmington, different market, different guest base, we'd slow down again feel our way in, make sure we had everything buttoned up, and then speed up again. So it's really kind of it's an if then. And we're still cautious, Jose. Like we'll go into, when we went into Texas, our expansion restaurants in Texas have a different, not dramatically different, but a slightly different menu. And, and so as we went into Texas, it was like a brand new day. We slowed down again, took our time, felt our way in, made sure we had everything dialed in correctly, and then repeat as necessary. So.
Hey, Richard, to that point, and Maria Gonzalez is asking an interesting question. Do we have Bolinda in low or high volume stores, or both? And it's both, right? We have it in all volume restaurants. And not all hours are high volume, and not all hours are low volume. But I mean, one of the beauties of this is, for instance, we have a very high breakfast business. We're very fortunate that we're in the industry and we happen to have 3 great day parts, right? Like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We do very well in all 3. We average about 38% of our restaurant sales by 11 in the morning. And in some of our restaurants where there's very, very high arrival rates for breakfast, in some cases, a person will go faster than the technology. And we will shut down Bolinda for those 1 or 2 or 3 hours and then put Bolinda back on. That's the beauty of the technology. You can decide when you want her to interact and when you don't. So we're finding success, I think, at all types of hours, and having the flexibility, whether it's turning her on or off, or whether it's having her suggestive sell what we need her to sell by day part.
And Jose, one thing I failed to do at the beginning, which I usually do with these things, is to explain to people that we are all sane, even though we refer to this piece of technology as a living, breathing thing. I still thank her at the end of a transaction. I always laugh. I told Jose the story. My team would make fun of me because I would thank the computer at the end of a transaction. One day, without telling me, they reprogrammed it to say, "You're welcome." And I've sat at the drive-thru laughing for about 3 minutes. So we do know it's a machine, but we have found that crew member adoption and love and warmth and success, I think, has everything to do with having personalized her.
Absolutely.
I want to ask a question that I think is important in terms of something I've noticed about how you do things. And that's that, that Richard, you're like the quarterback of this execution. And I think maybe you can talk a little bit like about the work that you two did together to convince the leadership of Bojangles, the franchisees, and then like you have marketing, you have the CFO, you have the COO, you have all of these different people that have different opinions. How do you get this thing moving so successfully and everyone happy?
First of all, I credit Jose for setting direction, right? And then there's influence from there. I have a slight advantage in having my entire career moved back and forth between disciplines, operations, over at IT, back and forth. And many of my team have similar experiences. So it helps, I think, a lot to think about what the other department heads are concerned about, And as we approached this thing, we kind of approached it from a team environment. It was never this has never been an IT project. It might have been for the first month or so. But as soon as we started moving forward, it became an operations project, a marketing project, frankly, a culinary project. Hey guys, we've got this nifty new tool that can upsell things, give us more desserts, give us more, premium beverages, give us things that we can let Bolinda loose on. And they responded as well. So I think it really has been a wonderfully collaborative effort here at Bojangles, because we've never treated this as an IT project. This has been a Bojangles project from day one, all inclusive, including our franchise partners and our franchise business consultants and the team that helps franchisees be successful. So it really has been. Of course, we had to convince the CFO that we could do it without losing money. That's what he cared about. Everybody else, it was more of a collaborative type. God bless him. Everybody else, it was a collaborative. How can we improve Bojangles? How can we make Bojangles stronger? And frankly, and I love this because we all think this way, how can we preserve the soft touch, Southern warm experience that makes our brand while introducing technology? And we've had similar challenges with other technology. We look very hard, we never forget who we are, and we work very hard to protect that. And that's where you get the buy-in across the organization. People with passion for the brand who can see that it's not a technology project. It's about enhancing the experience for the guests. If you can get that kind of alignment, you can move. If you have bastions of the company that aren't on board, I highly, if somebody asks, what do I recommend? Get everybody aligned, because this is a complicated road. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. It's all worth it. But you need everybody to kind of be coming along with you. Otherwise, you're not going to get there. Jose, would you add anything to that?
No, I think, at the end of the day, when things work in our industry, you don't have to push it. The word gets out fast, internally, industry-wide, and people get moving on it. Like the big thing now is lots of people are jumping on different beverage platforms because you want a higher attachment rate. You want to have more solutions. There's more competition with it. Same thing going on right now. The whole country's talking about AI. You hear about Elon Musk making a huge investment, raising capital. Our president talking about AI yesterday. Again, I'll end with what we started with. Everybody's using a device and becoming more efficient with it. Our industry does not need to fall behind on this. We could stay at the cutting edge, and we're fortunate to have a great partner like Roy and Hayato to help us get to where the customer is going. The customer wants reliability. The customer wants to be able to get in and get out quickly. That's why it's quick service restaurants. It's not slow service restaurants. And the beauty of this technology is that we haven't missed a beat when it comes down to the ability for this technology to interact as friendly, as effective, as efficient as a human person. Now, granted, a human touch is always preferred, right? But when you're going through a drive-through, typically you want to get in and you want to get out. And we have to be efficient with our customers and give them what they want. And we've been fortunate that Hayato's technology has been best in class. I was very proud to see a report that came out where, our AI was judged and audited by a third party, with AI being used by two competitors, Taco Bell and Wendy's. And we crushed it in terms of all the measures that were being used. And so it gave, I think, all of us great pride that we had the right partner with us to take us to the best place possible. And I think we'll continue to build on that as we go forward. And as we do go forward, I think we'll continue to refine the process and refine the scaling and refine the ROI so that we can maximize it as best as possible.
Roy, if it's okay with you, I'd like to speed round a couple of these questions fast to help people out. One person asked, was our slowdown about regional dialect or menu differences? Regional dialects have not been a problem for us. What has posed some challenges from time to time is, because we're an older brand, we've been around for God bless, a long time. We have guests that have been with us for a long time. They might order things differently from how the menu says it is today. So we had, as we move into new regions, we would slow down a little bit, make sure we understood the little idiosyncrasies. That was the main thing that we did there. We have not found an accent that it doesn't comprehend and understand yet. And we are all over our operating footprint. So we're very, very lucky with that. Somebody asked if we are using the latest and greatest Nexio hardware. Our new restaurant openings for the last year or so, Roy, I think, have been using the Nexio hardware with the Hayato device built in. For our restaurants that were built prior to that, we are adding the Hayato device and tying it in. And again, all of this works through, and all of this is controlled through our HME devices, our HME headsets and timers, et cetera. Roy, did you see?
Hey, Richard, I hate to be a party pooper
Oh, we're out
here,
of time. Yep. Try it.
and I see my friend Manuel Sosa saying congratulations. Thank you, Manuel. Had a lot of friends on this podcast and on the Q&A. We should have had it an hour longer, Roy, because there's a lot of interest here. Maybe we could do a part two.
Round two.
Yeah, I'm sure we could keep talking about this all afternoon, guys. It was a great conversation, lots of great participation from the audience there. So I really appreciate the peek behind the curtain on this. Clearly a topic that a lot of folks are very curious about. We are indeed at an hour, so this is going to conclude our program for today.
Went by too fast, Sam. It went by too fast. We were having a blast.
That's very true, yeah. On behalf of QSR Magazine, I would like to extend many thanks to Hi Auto for making today's webinar possible, to everyone in the audience for sending in your questions and engaging with our speakers, and then, of course, to Jose, Richard, and Roy for taking us through it all. Before we sign off, I want to encourage everyone to fill out our survey questions, tell us about your experience today. And as a final reminder, a recording of this program will be linked on qsrmagazine.com. You can also use today's login link to view it at any time. Thanks again, and have a great day, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, QSR. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, partner. Appreciate you, Richard.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Roy. Sam, great work.
Take care, everybody.